Hi, my name is Nolan Stolz. I'm a Black Sabbath scholar, a music professor, author of the book Experiencing Black Sabbath, a listener's companion, and other writings. And there's something that I wanted to share with you today, something I've been thinking about for quite some time, a couple documents that I came across that make me wonder, was there another band called Black Sabbath in 1969?
Before Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward were known as Black Sabbath, they were known as Earth. Forming as a band in 1968, they performed regularly, and then changed their name to Black Sabbath in August 1969. But an ad in the March 15, 1969 issue of Melody Maker shows that Black Sabbath played at the Marquee Club in London on March 13th, 5 months before the name change. This has troubled me for quite some time and got me wondering if there was another band named Black Sabbath, because the band consisting of Ozzy, Tony, Geezer, and Bill were consistently billed as Earth through August that year. I will provide a few examples of that now. On January 3rd, Earth opened up for John Heisman's Coliseum at the Marquee Club. Of course, that is assuming that this is the same Earth, as there were multiple bands going by that name. There was this article in New Musical Express about Earth, Locomotive, Tea and Symphony, and Bakerloo Blues Line being presented as a four-group package known as Big Bear Folly. Yes, 2 Fs. Debuting at the Opposite Lot Club in Birmingham on January 16th. The Big Bear Folly was the brainchild of Earth's manager Jim Simpson, and many of the musicians are pictured here. Many of these bands performed together in shows such as this one at the Marquee on February 6th, which included all four bands, plus Roy Everett, another member of the Folly. On March 21st, Earth played a Christmas party at the Pokey Hole in Litchfield, which is just north of Birmingham. Notice that Tea and Symphony played a week prior. The text underneath this photo from the show reads, "Unorthodox Christmas-type music from the Earth." Later that summer, Earth returned to the Pokey Club on August 1st. Notice that Tea and Symphony was listed as playing there 2 weeks prior. That August, Earth changes their name to Black Sabbath. According to Tony Iommi's book, the name change was announced at their August 26th performance in Workington in northwest England. Of course, the printed ad would still say Earth, as does this ad for their August 30th performance in Malvern. Notice that Tea and Symphony is also on the bill. Given the consistent use of the name Earth through August, was there another band named Black Sabbath in March of 1969? It seems highly unlikely that they would have used the name Black Sabbath for just one performance in March, 5 months before they announced the name change, and then continued to use the name Earth in March through August. That was the first document that made me wonder if there was another Black Sabbath. I recently found another document that seems to suggest this as well. Take a look at this ad from the July 5th issue of Melody Maker. Black Sabbath is listed among bands represented by Paragon Representation out of London. Although it is possible that Jim Simpson had worked with a London agency at this time, when asked about Paragon Representation, he did not recall that name. This flyer suggests that Earth must have been using the London City agency at some point in time, but I have never come across Earth's association with Paragon Representation before. Let's take a look at the artists represented by Paragon. None of them are related to the bands that Earth would play with, but they do relate to one another in some way. To familiarize you with them quickly, I will do a crash course in what these bands were doing in 1969. The first band on this alphabetical list is Brian Auger and the Trinity, and they were actively associated with Julie Driscoll, another Paragon artist. They had an album that year titled Street Noise, and it was released on Marmalade Records in the UK. A quick sidebar, check out the song Ellis Island from that album. The opening riff is nearly identical to the syncopated blues-based riff that bookends the guitar solo in Iron Man. But anyway, after Black Sabbath in the list is Blossom Toes. They had an album, also on Marmalade, in 1969 titled If Only for a Moment. They also worked with Julie Driscoll. Their bassist, Brian Belshaw, played on 2 tracks on Gary Farr's album Take Something With You, also on Marmalade. Farr was also represented by Paragon. The Spirit of John Morgan was another Paragon artist, and they had this album in 1969. These bands and artists were actively performing, and you can see here that Spirit of John Morgan opens up for another Paragon artist, Brian Auger. Circus had their eponymous album that year, which included a short number titled Goodnight John Morgan. Beginning in March, they played the Marquee Club 14 times as an opening band until they took Yes's spot as the Wednesday night headliner. Mike Hart had an album, Mike Hart Bleeds, and was billed as Mike Hart in the Business later that year. Paragon's artists played the Marquee often. This ad from November 22nd lists the Blossom Toes, Circus, Mike Hart in the Business, and one band I hadn't mentioned yet, Grail. Grail, also sometimes The Grail, played many shows that year, including 15 at the Marquee Club, including opening for Blossom Toes and Terry Reid. Another Paragon artist, Leviathan, had some singles out that year. This ad shows them opening up for Terry Reid on May 15th. White Trash had a single on Apple Records, and then the next single they were listed as Trash. Family was also represented by Paragon, and they had the album Family Entertainment that year. And here are a couple shows as examples of their activity. Notice that the Paragon artists often play shows together. For instance, Grail is opening up for Family, Leviathan is opening up for the Spirit of John Morgan. In the upper left of the screen, we see Mike Hart in the Business opening up for Blossom Toes, and below we see Circus and Blossom Toes on a show together in June. On the right, we see Paragon artists at the Marquee Club 3 nights in a row, Blossom Toes, Brian Auger, Circus. Among those booked at the Cambridge Midsummer Pop Festival were Paragon artists Blossom Toes, Family, Brian Auger and the Trinity, White Trash, and one I hadn't mentioned yet, Cooper's. On the Paragon ad, they are listed as Cooper. Also notice that Terry Reid is in the lineup. The only Paragon artist that does not show up around this time is Black Sabbath, except here. Is it possible that the Black Sabbath booked in the opening slot for Terry Reid's Thursday night show was not Ozzy, Tony, Geezer, and Bill? The same Thursday night slot that Paragon artists The Grail and Leviathan played as openers for Terry Reid 2 months later? A few days after I had put this video together, I stumbled across a forum post that mentioned Black Sabbath listed in a February 1st issue of Melody Maker. I went to that issue, and sure enough, 5 of the same artists from Paragon, plus one more, Jin, and I haven't found anything about them yet. So these artists were with Dave Robson, and then by July, they were with Paragon Representation and Dave Robson, which further explains the Black Sabbath booking at the Marquee Club on March 13th, opening up for Terry Reid. The ads in Melody Maker for Dave Robson Agency and Paragon were probably submitted in late January and late June. So was there a band not related to Earth named Black Sabbath, existing at least from January through June, perhaps earlier and later? Knowing that the Paragon artists were often performing together and sometimes shared musicians, and remembering that the bands associated with Big Bear also performed together, it seems that Earth and Black Sabbath were 2 different bands. For example, here are musicians from Big Bear rehearsing together, as they would actually join together at the end of the show in a jam session, as they called it. Center left on the microphone is Ozzy. And certainly they felt comfortable with one another because here's the same rehearsal but without clothes. With being consistently billed as Earth from before January 1969 and through August, I find it highly unlikely that they would be the same as the Black Sabbath that was with Paragon, especially considering how Earth would be associated with other Big Bear artists and how Paragon artists would be booked together or have similar bookings. It would not be surprising that another group of musicians would have used the name Black Sabbath, for it had been used as a title several times before, perhaps most famously for the movie Black Sabbath, filmed in 1963 and released in 1964. But there was also a three-act play from the 1940s titled Black Sabbath, a piano piece titled Black Sabbath by Peter Lewis, published in 1965 but apparently composed in 1959, a two-act play titled Black Sabbath by Stephen Kaufman in 1967, and in 1969, the year we are focusing on, there was the book Black Sabbath by Robert Katz. I'm not sure of the release date, but there was a review of it in a St. Louis newspaper on March 2nd, and other reviews were published that spring and summer. On August 13th, 1969, while Earth was in Germany at the Star Club, Mark Markham's rock band had a performance at an event in New York titled An Overdose of Reality, Black Sabbath, during which Ultraviolet, of Andy Warhol fame, sang and was sacrificed. The event was hosted by a magician named Eleven, who said, quote, "We'll be conjuring up spirits, both good and bad," end quote. And then there was the song Black Sabbath from Coven, also in 1969. It seems very plausible, then, that two bands could have come up with the same name, Black Sabbath, independently. But is it possible that members of Earth had heard about this other Black Sabbath, liked the name, and ended up using it themselves? With only one known performance by Paragon's Black Sabbath, it doesn't seem like they were an active band. Or if they were, they weren't in the same circles that Earth was in, so they probably didn't cross paths. Or did they? There is one more performance by Earth that I'd like to bring to your attention. It was at the Marquee Club on Tuesday, March 11th, just 2 days before the Black Sabbath performance at the Marquee Club. Perhaps members of Earth saw the name Black Sabbath listed in Marquee's March program, or posted somewhere at the club, liked it, and had it in the back of their minds. And with the other band fading into obscurity, the name Black Sabbath was theirs to use. Assuming there was another Black Sabbath, it does make you wonder, whatever happened to the other Black Sabbath? Did they break up or change their name by the end of August 1969? Or come August, were there two Black Sabbaths at the same time? And if so, were some of the gigs that have been attributed to the band that we know, were they actually by the other band?
Well, I hope you enjoyed that presentation, and I hope it got you thinking and wondering about this, and perhaps questioning some of the gig lists that you find on the internet. It's very hard to verify these things, because even if there is a ticket or a ad, it's possible the gig didn't actually happen. So there are a lot of possibilities, and there are a lot of other theories that I've thought about. But if you have any information about this, please send me an email at my work email address. That's nstolz, Nstolz, at uscupstate.edu. I teach at University of South Carolina Upstate. So, I've got another video about the flute on Born Again. I've got an essay in this book, Prog Rock in Europe. It's about Black Sabbath and their interest in prog from 1972 to 1980. I wrote the Sabbath entry in the 100 greatest bands of all time. Of course, I mentioned my book. This is probably, if you're watching this, you're obviously a Sabbath fan. So I think you'd find a lot of interesting things in there. I talk about the music. There's other writings. There's an article in Riffs Journal, in conference papers and stuff. So if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to email me at any time. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.